Welcome to ChiroSphere, where we talk about all things chiropractic and some things not so chiropractic. I'm Dr. Ray Foxworth, your host for ChiroSphere and CEO of Chiro Health USA, the network that works for chiropractic. Today we have Dr. Michael Perusich with us. He has consulting expertise across management, marketing, human resources, and finance. And he brings a wealth of knowledge and hands-on experience. And we're going to learn a lot today. As an entrepreneur, he's owned and operated successful businesses in finance and healthcare, including multidisciplinary clinics featured in chiropractic economics for their excellence in sports therapy and rehab. A nationally recognized speaker, author, and certified John Maxwell coach, Dr. Perusich has been a keynote speaker at major chiropractic events and is a trusted consultant for some of the largest clinics in the country. He's also set to release his new book, Adjusted Insights, a unique vision on the business of chiropractic. Boy, that's a timely subject and only has been for since our existence.
That's right.
Today, we'll uncover actionable strategies and stories to elevate your practice and professional growth. Well, welcome, Michael.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Thanks for the invite. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. So we were just chatting before we went live. I sat in on your lecture in Kansas City back in October, and
Right.
that's where I learned that chiropractic was a second career for you.
Yep.
You began in banking and finance. So I went to school with a number of people that chiropractic was a second career. It was for me as well.
Uh-huh.
What triggered you to make that change? It takes guts, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah. So in the role that I was in, I worked for a very large Wall Street firm, and I covered half of the country, literally half of the country, from Los Angeles all the way over to Washington, D.C. So I was on the road every single day, and I did that for 9.5 years.
Oh my gosh.
And one day, I don't really know what came over me. I was burnt out. I just didn't want to do it anymore. And so I started looking at other opportunities. I thought, well, I'll start another business, or I'll buy a business or something. I looked at manufacturing and all kinds of different opportunities. And I was at my chiropractor's office one day, and he said, why don't you go to chiropractic school? You'd be great at it. So I started looking into it, and I thought, wow, the potential return on investment here is really good. So I bit the bullet and did it and never looked back.
Wow. There's nothing like having a made up mind. I had a similar story. My mom and dad were both chiropractors, so I've been around it all my life.
Okay.
And I'd never really considered going to chiropractic college. I mean, I went out and I tell folks I did everything else I found out that I didn't want to do the rest of my life. And then I happened to be at a state association meeting and heard, I don't know if you know the name, Dr. Sig Miller. He was from New Jersey.
Oh, yeah.
But Sig spoke that weekend, and it's like, holy cow. Why did my parents tell me this? Well, I was growing up as a chiropractic kid. And so, I mean, we just didn't talk about those things. That's just what they did. And Michael, I went to my folks the week after that, and I said, I've decided I want to go to chiropractic college. And I'd had all the undergrad stuff out of the way and was doing something else at the time. And my dad said, well, have you saved up much money? And I opened my wallet. And I said, yep, I got $11. Okay. 2 weeks later, my wife and I and our son, we pack up our Datsun B210 and head to Kansas City. I mean, it's like when it clicks, it clicks.
Yeah, you just do it.
Yeah. Who was it? Steve Harvey, who talks about you got to take the leap. So I know there are people that listen to this that aren't chiropractors. So if you're struggling with where you are, I tell folks all the time, there's never been a better time to be in chiropractic. I know we have our challenges like everybody, but it just keeps getting better and better.
I agree. I just think the outlook for chiropractic going forward is just huge.
I could not. Absolutely, positively, it is. I have to pinch myself sometime. I serve on the Foundation for Chiropractic Progress, and the things that are being accomplished by groups like that, and the chiropractic strategic plan, it's
phenomenal.
My mother and dad would have tears welling up in their eyes if they could see all the progress that's been made. No doubt about it. So, what were some of the biggest challenges? I understand you had a couple of clinics or multidisciplinary and multiple locations. Is that accurate?
Yep.
So it's not easy to scale. You clearly did that. What were some of the biggest challenges you had in going from a solo guy? I'm assuming, did you go into solo practice at first or join a practice?
Yeah, I actually did a practice share with another doctor. And then my wife and I found out we were going to have a child, and we decided to move to a different town, um, which was a huge blessing. But, I think some of the biggest challenges were knowing when to stop scaling. And that may kind of sound a little counterintuitive, but we actually got to the point, Doc, where we were too big. And it just became an absolute bear to manage. Here we are, we're multidisciplinary. I've got medical doctors, I've got occupational therapists, I had 14 staff. And what I found happening was I was practicing chiropractic less and less and less because my role as manager had gotten so big.
Mm-hmm.
And we lived in Missouri, and we had a great big snow one day, 24 inches of snow, and I'm out shoveling my driveway, and all of a sudden my distal biceps tendon snaps.
Yep.
I'm out of practice for 11 weeks. And while I'm out of practice, I, I was looking at the numbers, and I had time to really kind of dive into things. And I realized that we'd gotten too big. We just weren't profitable enough because our overhead was huge. And so we started making some changes. And, by the grace of God, about 2 years later, we were 34% more profitable. And we had lit on a model of chiropractic that wasn't even heard of back then. And we completely turned things around, and practice became fun again.
So clearly, the ruptured biceps tendon led to quite an insight. I wouldn't recommend that as a way to
I
take
would
a
not.
deep dive
I would not.
on your practice. But I mean, that's a way. Sometimes it takes something like that for us to stop and look around and reassess, because otherwise, I mean, I know you've read all the books I have, Gerber's, the
Yep.
E-Myth, work
Oh,
on
yeah.
all this stuff. But man, when you're right there in the middle of it, sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees, and
Yeah, that's right.
it can get overwhelming. And
Mhm.
there's we've heard that saying, sometimes less is more.
Exactly.
And
Yeah,
and
it
and
truly is.
less can actually be more profitable than a huge operation. My God, not to mention the physical, emotional toll that running something like that can take on you. It is certainly not for everybody.
It's tough.
Yeah. So you made the transition from
Mhm.
banking into chiropractic,
Mhm.
and now and as a coach and consultant, and you've seen a lot. You're kind of like we are at Chiro Health. We kind of see the underbelly of
Yep.
the practices, and sometimes it's not pretty. Sometimes
Mhm.
our calls, even though we're talking to doctors about their financial policies and things of that nature, a lot of times they turn into therapy sessions.
They
You
do.
know,
They truly do.
hey, let's face it. As chiropractors, I mean, it's great if we have a key person, in the office that we can
Mhm.
really open up and share things with. But, a lot of us don't have that. And so just having a friendly ear that has had some insight into other practices and other businesses is, I think, just part of the value that anybody adds as a consultant, or coach. So
Yeah, I
having
agree.
seen what you've seen, what do you wish every chiropractor knew about the business side of practice? What's the first thing when you get a new doc and you're looking at their business, and I know you ask them to spell P&L, and some of us can't.
I just had that conversation with somebody yesterday. That's funny. The very first thing I say and the very first thing I ask is, what are your numbers? And so we kind of live by this idea of know thy numbers. And so what do I mean by that? We have to know our statistics. The statistics of any business is not just chiropractic, is incredibly important because numbers don't lie. It's the black and white of practice. And I think our profession has a tendency, and there's probably a lot of reasons for this, but I think we have a tendency to kind of shy away from the numbers, or we get hung up sometimes on just one or two numbers. We get hung up, and I hear this a lot when we go to conventions and things when we're speaking. You and I were at Cleveland in October, and I heard this from several people. Oh, I see 40 new patients a month. My practice is great. When you really dive into that, it doesn't really mean anything. You can have a healthy practice and only see 5 new patients a month. You can have a very unhealthy practice and see 100 new patients a month. I think we get stuck sometimes on these individual numbers, and there's basically four numbers that a lot of us get stuck on. We get stuck on services, collections, new patients, and patient visits. And individually, those numbers don't mean anything. We really need to look statistically at the deep side of the practice. And, that's one of the things that's one of the starting points we do with every practice we work with is let's take a deep dive and look at things.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we're kind of singing from the same hymnal, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
The doctors will, we'll be talking to them about, and we don't ever tell a doctor what to charge, where to set their fees. We can't give them any information like that. But we do walk them through the process of knowing your numbers, because, if you don't know that it costs you $27.17 to deliver an adjustment, then you cannot make a good decision about signing a managed care agreement that's paying you $15 or $35. You have absolutely,
Correct.
You can't make a loss up in volume. It's just not possible.
It's not possible. It just makes it worse.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, the slide that I have in my slide deck is you can't buy oranges for a dime and sell them for a nickel and wonder why you're not making a profit. And trust me, the solution is not to get a bigger truck.
It's not. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And we see so many practices who have set their fee strategy incorrectly. And I'll often ask, well, how did you come up with your fees? And the number one response to that is, well, everybody else is charging this.
Yeah, they call their buddy. It's called Sherman antitrust violation.
You're right. Exactly. Remind me to tell you a story about that off the record. But, but what I see happening so often is it's just a race to the bottom in some of these chiropractic communities.
Yeah,
the guy down the street's charging $19 for a new patient exam. Well, maybe his cost is only $18, but if yours is $30, you can't charge $19. And so we get this idea that to compete, we have to have the same fees. And not only could that be an antitrust issue, but I firmly believe that the marketplace doesn't look so much at what our fees are. They look at what the experience is. And a great analogy is Walmart is very, very busy, right? And they're, supposedly one of the cheapest places to go buy things. But then there's also Nordstrom's, who's at the other end, or Neiman Marcus at the other end, and they're incredibly busy too. And so if everything's based on price, then one of those two should not be doing very well.
You would think.
So it just goes to show you that it's not based on price. So in our realm, it's based on patient outcomes. It's based on doctors building good relationships with patients. And it's about building that great patient experience when patients are in the practice.
Yep. If you show the value and take care of the patients, the money will take care of itself. But
it will.
Well, let me rephrase that. I used to say the money will take care of itself. The money never takes care of itself.
Right.
You have to take care.
You have to take care of it.
You got to know your numbers. You got to know. You got to be able to read your P&L, and because otherwise, you're driving blind. No doubt about that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Something you mentioned that I want to key in on. As chiropractors, as healers, people who are driven to help other people, sometimes we have a hard time valuing our services because we feel like it's a blessing, a gift, or whatever it is we're passing along to those patients, which is all true. But a lot of times in our effort to be so helpful to patients, a doctor will look at his patient mix, if you will, and if they're seeing PI and workers' comp and insurance, they've got this whole, a good mixture of practice. When it comes to setting their fees, they tend to think of the smallest segment of the practice sometimes, which historically has been the cash-paying patients. And even though they may know that in their state, workers' comp will allow $100, pick a round number, $100 for a visit, they think, well, I can't charge that because my cash patients can't afford that. And so they'll try to say, well, instead of charging 100, I'll charge 75. Well, that really doesn't help the cash necessarily.
Right.
But it hurts you every single time you see a patient who does have coverage for that. And so here we are taking the oftentimes the lowest or the smallest segment of our patients that we see as far as case mix, and building our fees around the lowest common denominator, around the lowest payer, if you will.
Yep.
And so I mean, docs have got to know their numbers, but then they also have to realize that you've got to price your services in such a fashion that I don't care if you're the best chiropractor in the world, if you can't keep your doors open, you can't help anybody.
Correct.
And so, as Doc said, know your numbers, value your services, and make sure you're not just looking at, I saw X number of patients this week, because that doesn't mean squat. It really doesn't.
Right.
There was a point in time when we had a lot of new patients, but when we dug really deep, we had a lot of new patients coming in the front door and almost more going out the back door.
Yeah, exactly.
Coming in for one visit, two visits, that kind of thing. So,
well, and that's a great point, because we oftentimes think that to build a practice, now in the beginning of practice, in the first year or two, you need new patients. I get that. But, if you've been in practice 3 years, 4 years, 5 years or longer, you need retention, because it's retention that builds a business. It's not the number of new patients. And a lot of docs don't realize that we have a new patient capacity, and everybody's new patient capacity is different. And when you get over that capacity, you can't service people as well. They have a bad experience. They don't come back. If you go to Starbucks, everybody loves Starbucks, right? You go to Starbucks, and if it's super, super busy, what happens? They start making mistakes, and that happens with every single business. And the last thing you want to do is hand a patient the wrong cup of coffee, so to speak, in your practice. So, knowing your numbers goes way beyond just the dollars and cents of the practice and the number of new patients. There's so much more to it that you have to look at.
Well, if everyone would hang tight, we're going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsors. Welcome back to our podcast. We're having a great conversation with Dr. Michael here. He is with CATS Consultants. I actually used to be with CATS years and years and years ago. We may have been in the same class together.
Probably so.
Yeah. So I also know that you are a certified John Maxwell coach.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see leadership playing a role in the success of a chiropractic practice or any healthcare business? Because there are a lot of people that are great chiropractors, but they're not necessarily good leaders. So what benefits did you find out of going through that training, and what do you recommend to other doctors?
I think leadership for us in our practices lies on probably about 3 different levels. One, you need to be a leader in your community, especially if you're in a smaller community. But, regardless of where you're at, you need to get out of your office and be a leader in the community, because people look up to doctors, but they look up to doctors who act like doctors and who give back in the community. So that's number one. Number 2, we have to lead our staff. If you've got a team of staff, you've got to lead them. They expect you to lead them. And if you don't lead them, then they're just going to become task doers, and they're not really going to help you grow your practice, especially for the long term. And then finally, we have to lead our patients. Our patients are looking to us to tell them what they need and to lead them down the path of good outcomes, good results, lifelong chiropractic care, whatever it might be. But they're looking to you to be a leader. And I see this a lot. I see doctors who are fantastic, unbelievable clinicians, but they're not great leaders. They're not great communicators with their patients, and their dropout rate is huge. And a lot of times we're just tweaking that leadership capacity, if you will, just a little bit. That's a John Maxwell term, leadership capacity.
Yep.
We're tweaking that a little bit, and doctors make these great turnarounds in their practices when they step up and become a good leader with their patients.
Yeah. So, having consulted with a number of practices, what would you, if I asked you to give me the top 2 or 3 factors that differentiate a thriving clinic from one that's struggling, what are the top 2 or 3 things that you see?
Leadership is one of them. And I'm going to call it leadership / communication. Our profession hates this word, and I'm going to throw it out there. We think we don't want to be salespeople, but don't let that be a dirty word. We have to sell ourselves. like it or not, we have to sell ourselves. So we have to become good communicators. And that's really all sales is just becoming a good communicator. So that's a big thing that we teach is how to communicate, how to get your staff to follow you, how to get your patients to follow you, how to get your community to believe in what you do enough to refer people in so that you can build your practice. Again, I go back to the numbers. You have to know your numbers, but you have to know them on a deep, deep level. And you have to understand just a little bit about trending analysis. So it's not, we have a tendency to look at just these silos called a month at a time. Well, number one, that's history. So whatever statistic you had yesterday is behind you. But we need to look at what's going to happen in the future. So how do you look at the future? Well, you look at potential, and potential can be seen through a trending analysis. So we can look at your trend lines of different statistics. For example, new patients, we might look at. We might look at correlative statistics like number of new patients compared to the number of exams that you do per month, which gives a big indication of are you doing progress exams? Are you doing reactivation exams and those kind of things? And part of that's just being a good clinician, but part of that is, are you leaving money on the table too by not doing them? So there's a lot of things that you can pick out of your numbers. I think the other thing that I see a lot is this perception that doctors don't need a coach. And I'm going to tell you right now, and I hope most people out there that are listening know this. And again, you don't have to be a doctor to know this. It applies to any business, but you can't do everything. You can't see everything. There's a reason why Michael Jordan had, I think it was 9 coaches, because he appreciated the value of other people seeing things that he couldn't see and helping him develop the tools and the skills to adapt those things into how he played. That's part of why he was so great. And we need to look at our businesses the same way. We cannot see everything on our own. When you're head down all day long treating patients, you don't have time to think about the business side of your practice. Now, you may have a great office manager who's really good at it, but they can't see everything either. So having that independent oversight, if you will, and we see this all the time, really helps practices catapult to those next levels of success.
Yep. Two things that you said that really speak to me. We're a part of a lot of different Facebook groups, and there's clearly a lot of mixed emotion about, do you need consultants? Do you need a coach? Are the consultants just ripping people off? Yeah, I mean, you've seen all the stuff we do, and I've had consultants pretty much all of my practice life, at different times, at different stages. And when I have docs ask about that, from my perspective, if you've got it all going on and everything's great, maybe you don't need one as much, but rarely does a doc come out of school with the business background and the ability to hit the ground running like that. And while true, there is more information out there today, free, online, that anybody could learn from, just tons of resources. The reality is, yes, you can go and learn and do all that, which is fine. That's certainly a way to do it. But, take it outside of chiropractic. How many golf videos and golf instruction videos and things are out there that anybody could learn to play golf, but your elite players, what do they have?
Coaches.
They have a coach, they have a consultant, they have somebody that looks at it differently. And when you mention it's great to have a good office or team member in the office that can oversee that stuff. But even on our best day, if we're just looking at our practice, we have a very limited perspective. You don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And so by having someone that has worked with other practices, has seen what's around the corner, if you will, can help you prepare for it. You can't get that on your own. And not to mention, right, camaraderie, the relationships that you build when you got people that are walking, taking the walk together. I think there's a lot of positive things that come out of that. I mean, geez, look back at the Parker days. My mom and dad,
right.
I tell people I had a drug problem. They drugged me to Parker every time they were Parker. but there are thousands of chiropractors that would get together, and the
Yeah,
relationship that would develop,
it's
and
huge.
that's the part of maybe the consulting side that people really don't see, is because, like I touched on earlier, we don't always have that person right there in our immediate community that we can open up with and share things with, and struggles and successes.
Right.
And having that community, I think, can really be helpful for a lot of people.
I think also, Ray, I think you have to look at coaching as an investment. And it's not just an investment in your practice, but it's an investment in you. It's an investment in your team. And it's an investment in your future success. And I see far too often, I see doctors looking at the cost of coaching and calling it just an expense, when that coaching may be parlaying that investment, that, whatever amount it is, I'll make up a number, $1,000 a month. But what if it's making you an extra 15,000 a month? Is that a good investment? Yeah, that's a great investment. What is that, a 1,400% return or something? That's not bad. That's not bad. So I think you've got to have the right perspective when it comes to coaching. And I'm not real sure why our profession has kind of got locked into this idea that we don't need coaching. My gosh, I mean, you mentioned golfers. One of my best friends is a professional golfer, and he has a health coach, he has a putting coach, he has a driver coach, he has a club fitting coach. I think he's got 6 different coaches. And, I've asked him, I know what the answer is, but I like to hear him say it. I ask him sometimes, why do you have all these coaches? Because I know I can get better, is his answer. And, we have to think in terms of the process of mastery. And Michael, sorry, my mind just went blank. The famous Italian painter painted the Sistine
Michelangelo.
Chapel. Thank you. He always looked at his work and said, gosh, I could have done better. And that's the process of mastery. And I think if we bring that into our chiropractic practices and think, gosh, I know I can be better.
There's always a better way.
There's always a better way. Read the book Good to Great. That's an excellent expose of how you can be a good business, but there's always a way to be a great business, and it never stops.
So we've both been around a bit now, close to 30 years, me a little more than that.
Gosh, do we have to
What do you
talk
think
about
has
that?
been the same? What do you consider the single biggest change in chiropractic in the last 20 years?
Gosh, there's probably a couple things. I mean, the research is certainly coming out and, saying everything we've always said was true, and even more so, which is great, because that's just ticking us up the totem pole of healthcare. But I think the other thing is, there's been such a change in insurance and insurance rules and insurance reimbursement. And because of that, the practice landscape has really changed. And those practices that have been dependent on insurance reimbursement, some of them are kind of struggling right now. And so we're seeing this big shift towards cash practice, and I'm not saying you necessarily have to be 100% cash, but to more cash-based services. And I think that's going to have a profound positive impact on our profession. And we're already seeing it. Those practices that have moved in that direction are already busier. They're more profitable. Their practices are easier to run. And they go home at night worried a little bit less about that audit ghost that could show up around the corner at any time. So, I think that's a real positive for our profession. I hear a lot of doctors say, oh my gosh, insurance is just killing us. I applaud. I mean, that's a great thing if you make the shift to get away from it so much.
I can remember lecturing to a group of docs, and we were talking about, because my folks practiced before there was insurance in the state of Mississippi. They didn't even license chiropractic till 73 here. And so for years, I mean, there was no insurance, no workers' comp, no P. I mean, nothing. It was all cash. And then having seen them go through that, and then me going into practice, a generation later, I can remember when they would make recommendations to patients and wouldn't hesitate recommending what they thought the patient needed. And if we look at the profession overall, what I perceived happened is, it was Before there was insurance, patients came to us because they wanted to, because they got results, and, docs were doing good. Did we want insurance? Absolutely. Why shouldn't it? People are paying premiums. Why shouldn't they access it? But I think in some ways, insurance, especially the 80s, 90s, early 80s, 90s, it made us lazy as a profession in some ways because, when you got $5 copays or no dollar copays and unlimited benefits, how hard is it to convince someone to come in for treatment? And so maybe we weren't doing as good a consult or an exam or a report of findings and explaining the need of care and how they're going to pay for it because, again, you got enough demand there. I think it could lend to letting you get a little lax, a little sloppy, if you will. Insurance
Agreed.
goes away, and buddy, you better be on your A game.
Yeah.
It's there
Yeah.
is no third party there to pay the bill, and people always buy what they want. They don't always buy what they need. And so when you talk about sales, what I hear is you got to learn to educate. And if sales bothers you, fine, throw that word out. But really, all sales is education. I mean,
It is.
it is explaining to people what what they need, and let them make the choice.
Absolutely. 100% agree.
So give us a sneak peek into your book, Adjusted Insights. Give me a couple of perspectives that people will take away when they order that, because I know they.
It's honestly, it's just a collection of some of my favorite articles that I've written over the years. So I write an blog article, excuse me, every week. And so it's just a collection of those. And those blog articles, most of the time are just my crazy way of thinking. I like kind of mixing things up and doing things different, looking at things differently. And so it's just my perspectives on good business insights for chiropractors.
Well, good deal. I also noticed before we got on the call at the website, catsconsultants.com, you guys have got a number of free resources available.
We do.
And some classes and courses and some a la carte items, which I like for those that don't think they need a full-blown coach. Go take a bite-sized chunk of it, if you will. And I think y'all also have a upcoming virtual webinar or seminar coming up on February the 6th. So
We do.
want to be sure and check that out. So I got a couple of just for fun questions. Who's your hero and why?
My father, because he was an amazing, amazing person.
Well, there you go. Didn't take long for that one.
Nope, that's easy.
What talent do you have that most people don't know about?
I play the guitar.
Do you?
Yep. And I've been in several bands, and we even have a little family band. So everybody in our family either plays or sings.
Well, I have two Fenders, a Les Paul, a 63 Epiphone hanging up on the wall in there, actually with Joe Bonamassa, if you know that name.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Pearl Inlay. Yeah.
Very nice.
I'm amazed at how many chiropractors that just in my world that I know are musicians or have been musicians. And I don't know if it's because of the tactile thing that we have in
Probably so.
music, but I mean, geez, it's almost hard for me to name some 5 chiropractors that don't play some kind of musical instrument.
Yeah, it is. It is kind of fun.
Maybe we want to get our state associations in Cleveland to have a talent show.
Yeah, well, and Dr. Cleveland plays the piano, so
he actually, yes, he does. At our graduation, we weren't expecting this, but we had we had a band when I was in chiropractic college, and who shows up to play with the band our night of graduation? Dr.
I
Carl.
love it. I love it. That's great.
It was awesome. What's the worst job you ever had?
Okay, so I used to work for my father in the summertime. He owned a big engineering firm, and they had a warehouse where they stored a lot of equipment, prefab stuff, and the pigeons would break into it and just make a mess. So cleaning up pigeon leftovers, I'll call it, dead pigeons.
Pigeon chips.
Yeah, exactly. And I would come out of there and I'd just be covered in the dust, and it was a horrible job, but nonetheless, it was kind of fun.
Yeah, you think back on that, and in some ways you have to thank your dad for that, because it motivated you not to have to do that the rest of your life.
Yeah, and it really taught me the value of hard work.
Yeah,
and
no doubt.
My father was a great businessman. My mother was a business teacher, high school business teacher. So I was around business all the time,
Hmm.
and both of them were just very hard workers, and just taught me that a little bit of elbow grease goes a long way.
No doubt. Well, thanks for spending some time with us today, Michael, and thank you all for listening to the ChiroSphere podcast. Please subscribe and share the podcast with your friends, and let us know who you'd like to hear from in the future, what topics you'd like us to cover, and we'll do our best to deliver. If you want to learn more about ChiroHealth USA and how we can help you develop a compliant, profitable discount strategy that will absolutely grow your practice, your income, and profitability, call us at 888-719-9990 or visit us at chusa.com, that's CHUSA.com, to find out why ChiroHealth USA is the network that works for chiropractic and you. Thanks so much, Michael.
Appreciate it, Dr. Foxworth. Have a great day, and everybody go check out CHUSA. It's an amazing program.
Thank you, sir.